Well, to discuss depression a bit further and reflect on the current cases of people who we've lost as a result of depression, I'll be joined in studio by Toli Tembeli Hlengwenya, who is a student activist at the University of Pretoria. Over the phone line, we'll be joined by Kyaleboga Chweni-Mang, who is a clinical psychologist. A very good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me just start with you then, since you are closest to me. In terms of your student activist activities on campus, what is the focus on mental health and awareness of issues such as depression?
The reality is, in the institutions of higher learning, mental health is not a priority in the spaces that we find ourselves in. A priority, rather, is the research output or your academic performance in those institutions of higher learning. So as student activists, we've come to the realization that even the student support that is in place is actually not even sufficient to help with students, because you arrive there and they tell you that they don't have enough psychologists, or that you must wait a period of about 3 weeks before you can actually get access to a psychologist. And considering the nature of depression and the nature of mental health, it's not sufficient, or rather, you can't expect students then to wait 3 weeks, whereas they're dealing with the issue currently. So as student activists, we're saying we need the institutions of higher learning to invest more in relation to our mental health, and not to just focus on the neoliberal prescripts of trying to live up to global standards, or rather the research output that they're so obsessed with, and not actually creating academic conditions that are conducive for students at our universities.
Now, Kyaleboga, good evening to you. Let me just come across to you as a clinical psychologist. What are some of the factors that really push students to the edge of depression when they're on campus? What are they facing actually?
Good evening to you, Jura Bese, and to the viewers. Just for a slight correction, I'm actually a counseling psychologist. In terms of the factors that usually lead to depression among students, there's a plethora of those. You really have a number of things that students do experience when they start their student life across different campuses, different tertiary institutions, and so on. But basically, the basis of depression is on biological factors. You find an imbalance in the chemical makeup in the brain. You also think about genetic factors. Some people and some students, of course, will be born to parents who might be depressogenic themselves, suffering from depression of some sort, and most importantly, psychosocial factors. These factors range from environmental to life events. If you look at what is happening when students take a transition from high school education into the tertiary institutions, there isn't a seamless supportive system that is there to be able to cushion them through that. As my colleague in the studio said that, you find that there isn't enough capacity, even within the institutions of learning that might be having student counseling centers. Students might be experiencing something that would require them to get, if you like, assistance that might be urgent. But because of a number of students who might be in need of such a service, they have to wait and so on. So there's really a number of factors, particularly if you those who might be just coming from high school, and even those who might have been in the field itself. The fact that there are adjustment issues, having to adjust now to the environmental stress that comes as a result of the expectation to be able to perform and to achieve academically, among other things. We know that there are issues of finances. Hence, there's been campaigns for free scholastic or academic education and so on. These do really contribute to students being depressed, experiencing anxiety that my future will be doomed. I don't have the ability to be able to achieve the objectives and the goals that academically I have come here in an attempt to be able to achieve. So there's really a plethora and a variety of factors that definitely do impact negatively and adversely on students.
Well, just coming back to studio, Tholi, what can be done then on the campus level? I mean, you mentioned that there are some psychologists available, but that the waiting period could be up to 3 weeks. Imagine having an exam that's coming up in 2 weeks or an assignment due in a week. You can't wait 3 weeks to deal with those issues, before someone drops out or ends up committing suicide. What then can be done?
I think there needs to be a better attempt at creating awareness in relation to mental health issues, because you are in an institution and you're not aware that these structures are in place, and even if they are in place, then they're not sufficient. I think universities or institutions of higher learning should then look into working with NGOs who have volunteers who deal with these issues at community level, and maybe then they could also come and work in these institutions of higher learning. Because the reality is it doesn't help to continue as if nothing is going on, because the long-term effects are that you'll get students who arrive in university and don't even finish their degrees. And for me, I think the costs are higher than you prioritizing the research output as opposed to a person's well-being and them ensuring that they're going to be well-rounded individuals who are able to enter the economy and actually contribute to it as best as they can. Because the reality is mental health is actually quite an important issue, and in the environment or the community that we find ourselves in, we are consistently pushing it or putting it under the carpet. Because I mean, as people, or rather as black people, you socialize in an environment that, no, you must remain strong. It's going to get better. And these things then continue to build up. And then you go into the environment such as institution of higher learning and even the workspace with that same mental attitude. And that's then why we have cases such as the late professor that then took his own life, because these things are not addressed and not taken seriously in the manner that they should be.
And I mean, you mentioned something important there, awareness. I mean, if I wake up and I've got certain symptoms, I can tell you that, okay, fine, I think I've got the flu because I know what the symptoms of flu are. When it comes to depression, do students actually know that they're depressed, or do they find out when it's too late?
I don't think it's easy to identify or figure out when you're actually depressed, because as much as I understand that depression is a medical disease, and sometimes you're not aware if, am I just sad, or what am I for a long period of time, let's say. And also in the communities that you're in, once again, because you can't look at university outside of the community that you stay in. The community will say things like, no, something is wrong with you. You're bewitched. Why are you never happy? And these things are not discussed at length, or rather, they don't look at the nature of how multi-layered they actually are. So it's hard for me to sit and say, I might actually be depressed, where I'm in an environment where I'm expected to just cope and keep going. The reality is, even when you look on social media, the tweets, the Facebook statuses are encouraging you that, no, you need to continue, you need to hustle, irrespective of how you're feeling. If you don't hustle, then you are almost marginalized in the community that you find yourself in. You're called lazy. And sometimes you can't help but think, am I actually depressed? Or is the issue actually with me? Am I not encouraged, or do I not have a positive attitude maybe? So it's hard to identify the symptoms. And I also don't think, as I said earlier, there's enough awareness to make students aware that in the event that you're stressed for, let's say, 2 weeks or so, the reality is that you could actually have depression.
Yeah, and just coming back to you, Kyaleboga, in terms of students, I mean, there's a lot of pressure being in varsity. You've mentioned the adjustment of high school to university. A lot of people aren't actually prepared for the overwhelming amount of work and overwhelming amount of freedom that comes with a great deal of responsibility that you're actually walking into when you get to university. If someone happens to, I mean, you mentioned also something about a chemical imbalance. You can't tell if you're not a medical practitioner that you've got a chemical imbalance. So if students are watching us right now, what should be those sort of red flag signals that say, okay, I need to go see a doctor just to check if everything is all right?
Indeed, Dora Petri, there's a number of signs really that constitute depression that people often might be, overlooking. But one reason could be because, when people experience a certain condition, that might be creating so much pressure on them. Amid the expectation, to perform, to achieve, and so on. People carry on because they take also that as part and parcel of what they are going through. But the important thing is they need to be aware that, one can only be able to take stress and pressure to a certain level and be able, or might also need to be able to recoup, to sort of refill their energies and so on by doing certain things. Most importantly, going and seeing professionals, particularly where there are student counseling centers and so on. But in terms of the signs specifically, when one experiences depression, you will see when the mood is very flat, the person feels sad, they feel empty and hopeless to a certain extent. They have diminished interest or pleasure in activities that they used to derive pleasure from. Some would actually exhibit sign of weight loss or weight gain, particularly when either their appetite has increased or decreased as a result of the depression. So it is very important for people to be aware. Mental health education is important. Also, things like insomnia. Of course, insomnia might also, in the academic setting, insomnia might be as a result of the fact that one is anxious, You've got anxiety, you don't see sleeping as an option because you need to perform, you need to really get the results. But with depression, insomnia is when one is not able to fall asleep, or they will fall asleep, and in the middle of the night, when they still desire to have that restful sleep, they wake up. Or also they might have hypersomnia. Hypersomnia is excessive sleep or excessive feeling of wanting to sleep all the time because their energy is down and so on. And quite commonly with hypersomnia, it will happen during the day because what happens when someone has got insomnia, it means at night they don't sleep. So their brain does not have the rest that they require or the rest that it requires. And now, come day when they have to perform, go to classes, do assignments and run between lecture rooms and so on. When they sit, they don't have so much energy that they feel like sleeping. Psychomotor agitation or retardation. They become agitated, panicky and so on because they are stressed, they are anxious, or they become retarded, slow, you will see that the posture is really of someone who's really kind of very exhausted, feelings of worthlessness, feeling that I cannot perform, I would not be able to perform, and feeling guilty that maybe there's something that I'm not doing right. Perhaps I need, self-blame, all those kind of things. But most importantly also, what comes through is the fact that there is so much there's diminished ability to be able to think and to concentrate, memory problems, being forgetful, not being able to pay attention. All of these things that are very much required and central in tuition, in academic setting. They are necessary because they help you to absorb the information and the knowledge and for you to be able to then get the necessary education. So, but the important thing, and lastly, in terms of the science, is the fact that one might, as a result of these things that I've just explained also, have recurrent thoughts of death, because of the hopelessness and the helplessness that they might be feeling. They end up having recurrent thoughts of death or dying. And that's where the issue of suicide quite often comes in. Others just have the ideation, the desire to die or to take their own lives because they feel so helpless, powerless. And quite often there's no plan, but there are instances where there can also be suicide attempts with a specific plan having been put in place. So these are some of the signs, the withdrawal. The person who does not all of a sudden no longer participate and socialize with others, experiences bouts of anger, is temperamental, is short-tempered, and so on. They are irritable. It's very important. Quite often we do not pick these things up because some people are able to mask them in some way. So these are some of the signs really that we can pick up when someone is depressed. But it also is important, that we should get against also over-diagnosing depression. There are normal reactions and responses stress, environmental stress, to changes that comes within our environment. Of course, if you change your job from where you are now and you go to a different province or different place, there are some adjustments that need to be done. So some people might be sort of adversely kind of affected by those necessary changes and so on. So I think it's important while we talk of depression, it's very important, especially in the light of what has transpired over the last 2 weeks or so. It is also important that we do not overdiagnose it, we do not over-preach it, because we can end up also suggesting and proposing that people should be weakly, to resort to say, I'm depressed.
Thank you very much, Kialoboga. It's been very insightful just talking to you this evening. Toli, just lastly from you in about 2 minutes, any way you think we should be moving forward, and just a word of encouragement to someone who's in varsity first year, watching us tonight.
I think moving forward, we need to ensure that we check on each other. It's something that I've been putting on social media the past couple of weeks, considering also what has been happening in the country after we had lost Kensani, who was actually a friend of mine. And I came to the realization that you become so consumed with your own life and trying to achieve your own goals that you forget to actually just check on the next person. So I do think that we need to create an environment or a culture where you're not so focused and conceited, or focused on yourself rather, but also the people that actually surround you, because you are what you are because of the community that you actually find yourself in. So to that first year that's in university, don't give up. I understand that it's a hostile environment and you might feel that you are alone. Go and seek support. If you're at an institution where there is student support, I suggest that you actually also even call your family and let them know that you're not coping, because the university environment is one that is very tricky, because it needs you to balance your time, your studies, sometimes even your social life. So it's important that when you're not okay, take a step back and look after yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the most important. There's nothing more important than your mental health. If you're not okay, then you can't be as effective as you should be in relation to even your studies at the end of the day, which is what you are actually there for. So take care of yourself is all I can say at this particular point in time.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. The conversation does continue, so you can follow us on social media. Our handle is @AfroWorldView. It is time now for a short break. We're back with more news after that, so do stay with us.